G'day, Starlo here. I wanted to share some really exciting Squidgy's news with you. A lot of you who watch my channel know that I was very closely involved with the development of the Squidgy's soft plastics back at the end of the 1990s and into the early 2000s. Myself and my mate Bushy actually designed the Squidgy's for Shimano Australia, and it wouldn't be stretching things to say that they changed the way that Australian anglers go fishing. Squidgy's have had a big impact over the years. My own direct involvement with the design of the Squidgy's finished back in 2016 when our contract with Shimano finally came to an end. But as part of the Shimano-sponsored anglers team, I still get to use new products before they hit the shelves, including Squidgy's, and I also get some input into what I'd like to see added to the range. Well, for the last couple of months, I've had a chance to play around with 4 new Squidgy's that'll begin hitting the shop shelves throughout Australia during November 2025 and should be widely available well before Christmas. Now, I say 4 new ones, it's actually 2 old classic Squidgy's that have been reintroduced and 2 completely new Squidgy's. So let's have a look at each one of them in a bit more detail, and I'll start with those classics that have been reintroduced. And the first of them is the Squidgy Lobby. This is a lure that I reckon back in the day probably really didn't receive the sort of recognition that it deserved. A lot of us caught a lot of fish on them, but they didn't sell as well as some of the other Squidgy's, and eventually they were taken off the market. Well, funnily enough, since then, a lot of people have worked out how good they really were, and we've had a lot of requests to bring back the Lobby. So there it is. It's got a yabby or prawn-shaped body and these 2 arms that effectively make it a twin-tailed plastic. I've always thought that it's a really good imitation of something that's very uncomfortable about swimming around in the water, perhaps something like a hermit crab that's been pulled out of its shell, but it's also a great imitation of a yabby, either saltwater or freshwater, or a prawn or a shrimp. You can fish it in all manner of ways. Put it on a jig head, fish it unweighted, fish it slowly, lots of stops and starts. Just a great lure. And with those really distinctive belly flaps, it holds the S-factor scent particularly well. There have been some minor improvements made on the original Squidgy Lobby pattern with the addition of these little flat areas at the end of the tentacles. They just give it that little bit more action. Great to see it back. Just the one size at the moment. You can see the colours that are available here behind me. I think it's going to develop quite a big following the second time around, but I'm even more excited about the other OG Squidgy that's come back, and that is the Squidgy Bug. This is an absolutely classic soft plastic, a curly tail grub, but it was designed very specifically by Bushy and I to be fished unweighted on the surface, which is why it's got a flat belly. We used to just rig these on a simple jig hook, no other weight, cast them out, hold the rod tip up and wind them across the surface. They make a great wake and that tail flaps away there on the surface. Absolutely deadly up between the racks of an oyster lease or across the top of shallow reef or whatever. We very much intended them for use on brim, but they caught a lot of estuary perch and all sorts of other fish as well. But the thing is, you stick one on a jig head and bomb it down, and it's a deadly curly tail grub. I really like them. I've fished with these a lot over the years. I think it's something about the little red eyes too. They really stand out in the water. And I can't believe how many people over the years since these things disappeared off the market have come to me and said, please get Shimano to bring the Squidgy Bug back. And I pass those messages on. It's taken a while, but the Squidgy Bug is back, and that makes me very, very happy, and I think it's going to make a lot of you out there very happy as well. Again, one size, these colours, the Squidgy Bug was a classic, always will be a classic. So good to see it back. All right, that's the 2 rebirthed Squidgy's. What about the 2 new ones? Well, the first of those is simply a grub Now, a lot of you will remember the bio-tough squidgies that were around a year or two ago. They're no longer on the market, but there was a grub in that range that went exceptionally well. Well, this has kind of taken that theme and exaggerated on it even more. It's got a really seriously large tail that's just packed with action. Nearly every soft plastic company has got a grub like this in their range, and it's about time that Squidgy had one. And I think they've taken a good thing and possibly made it even better. This thing is just packed with action. You've barely got to move it at all. You can just hold it there in a little bit of current and it'll swim really well. It swims extra well on the drop on a jig head, and it's going to be great on things like flathead and bream and bass and all sorts of freshwater natives. I reckon yellow belly will be all over that. So that's the grub. Good to see that. Oh, and it comes in a black grub as well. And any of you who chase bass or golden perch, yellow belly in impoundments will know just how effective grubbing the trees can be, vertical presentation in the standing timber. And the preferred colour for that has always been black. So there you go, there's a black grub. It's got a nice little bit of red highlight just up here near the head as well. And last, but certainly not least, perhaps the most unusual new squidgy to join the lineup in quite a long time. This one is called the Glimmer, and it's just very much a straight body. You can see this thing's not going to have a lot of built-in action. It's a straight, almost cylindrical body, a couple of nice prominent little eyes there. And this, it's got a fibre tail. A flash tail that comes out of the back, and it's well anchored. You can pull on that hard and the tail doesn't come out. Now, they're quite long, these fibres. One of the things that I do when I fish with the Glimmer quite often is trim the tail back a little bit, make it a little bit shorter. And I like to cut the strands at different lengths just to give it that taper and a little bit of unevenness. I've cut it down sometimes to half that length, but I usually start by just taking a few millimetres off just to reduce the overall size and impression of the lure in the water. But it would really depend on what you're using it for, and that's where this is an amazing lure. You can fish this as a finesse bait really slowly, dead stick it, fish it a bit like you would have fished the old Squidgy flick baits. Now there's another one I'd like to see them bring back. I'll keep working on them. But you could fish this exactly the same way. It's got very little inbuilt action, so you could just do little sharp flicks of the rod tip and make it dart from side to side, especially on an extra light head, a resin head, or just a tiny jig head, so that it doesn't drop too quickly between those jinks. That'll work super well on things like bream and estuary perch in the snags. But, look at it. What else is it going to be good for? Pelagics. You can chuck that out. If you rig it nice and straight on your jig head, you can throw that out and retrieve it as fast as you would retrieve a metal bait fish profile or a slug or whatever. But the good news is you don't normally need to go quite that fast. I've thrown this at quite a few pelagics already, both down south and up north. And I'm telling you, they jump all over it. It's a great imitation of a white bait or a small bait fish, and that bit of flash out of the tail, they just hit this thing. Quite often they hit it while it's still sinking after you've cast it into the school or ahead of the school of trevally or queenfish or tuna or tailor or salmon or whatever it is you're chasing. It is going to be a red-hot killer on the pelagics. But those bait fish profiles, the metal ones, you're not going to throw those into a snag and catch a bream or an estuary perch on them. Well, not very often anyway, but this thing you will. So a really versatile lure. I've got to say, probably out of the four, the two I'm most excited about are the Glimmer and the return of the bug. But it's great to see the lobby back, and it's also really good to see that big, exaggerated tail grub join the Squidgy lineup. Look, I'll be telling you a lot more about these in coming weeks and months as I get out and use them even more. Every time I've used them so far, I've caught fish on them, so they're working really, really well. If you want to see exactly how I use any of these different styles of lures, I did a whole episode on that, and you'll find a link to it either up here in the corner or down below in the description. And within that episode, you'll also find a link to my online course about fishing soft plastics, mastering soft plastics. Well and truly worth doing that one. Anyway, until next time, this is Starlo wishing you tight lines.